And so, what is the meaning of emotional intelligence? Quite simply, it's the ability to understand one's emotional self and to govern and control or meter one's emotional experience. You have the ability to do that. It sounds pretty easy. I know I went, yeah, I think that makes sense to me, right? And then if we take it a step further, how do we govern and meter and monitor that? Oh, now that's where it gets a little slippery. So before we dive too far into the emotional experience, it might be a great moment for you to just take a moment and reflect. Like, how are you with your emotional experience? The reality is, we as human beings, we have been given an incredible navigation system. And that navigation system consists of your physical body and your emotional
And
body.
let me just say, if you're having problems with that word emotion or emotional, you know what? It's feeling. It's right. It's synonymous with it's the feeling part of your life. Which is it's the sweetest part of our life, but many of us avoid it like the plague. So you can use those interchangeably. Emotional again is kind of the clinical, but it's feeling, right,
Yeah,
Mrs. Bartley?
it
It's feeling,
it's the feeling part of
the
ourselves. So
feeling.
we have this physical body that we all relate to, that we all understand, and we live our lives through the physical lens because it makes sense to us. It's tangible, it's quantifiable. We can measure it, right? We can agree on it most times. So when we get into a conflict, we're going to go to the physical because, again, that's what makes sense to us. Now, our emotional bodies, they're real too. And the really great news is if we take care of our emotional bodies through our physical lens and we compare those two, it's going to give us a lot of clues in regards to understanding our emotional selves, which most of us are terrified of. Why? Because contrary to our physical experience, again, physical is my thinking, my doing, my tangible. I can measure it, I can quantify it. We could put our hands together, and physically, I would see very clearly where I end and you begin. And we wouldn't argue about that. Yeah, yeah, that's my hand. Yep, that's your hand. Yep. This is where my foot is compared to my shoe. We could agree on the wall that divides the room. We could decide and define all kinds of things. Even when I go to a medical doctor, they can run tests and quantify very quickly what's going on with my physical body. But when it comes to my emotional body, and again, both of these things are very real, that becomes a little more tricky. Why? Because my emotional body, oh, see, that's a very different thing. It's invisible, it's intangible, right? It's traveling fast. And not only does it travel fast, it time travels. So I could hear a song that I used to have an affinity for or an emotional connection to back in 1970, and I can hear it right now in present day, and I'm all of a sudden traveling back to 1970. I can also have a trigger that we call in the world of psychology that happens in me. And all of a sudden, once again, I'm traveling back to 1970. And so our emotions are something that most of us are really scared of. And here's the other bit you need to understand: our emotional experiences cannot be quantified, they cannot be measured, and they cannot be compared or judged. Why? Because they are very unique to me. They're part of my personality, they're part of what makes me tick. And you and I might be having a very similar experience in the physical, but we might have a very, very different experience in the emotion.